Bedtime Stories for Kids, The Princess and the Pea. Once upon a time, in a splendid kingdom by the sea, there lived a young prince who had everything: wealth, wisdom, charm, and a voice like music when he laughed. Everything that is, except a bride, not just any princess. He would often say, she must be a true princess, in heart, in soul, in spirit. His parents, the king and queen, shook their heads. You've met dozens. The queen sighed, sipping her tea. And none of them were real, the prince insisted. At least, not in the way that matters. So, he set off. Across rivers and deserts, through cities and snow-covered mountains, the prince traveled. He met royalty in sapphire palaces and desert forts, spoke with princesses who were brilliant, beautiful, clever, and yet, something was always missing. Too boastful, he said after meeting one. Too shallow, he whispered after another. Too eager to please, he frowned at a third. He wasn't looking for perfection in appearance or lineage. He was searching for someone who felt genuine, someone who noticed little things, someone who carried her dignity quietly. Eventually, tired and a little heartsore, he returned home. Did you find her? The queen asked, folding her hands. The prince shook his head. Maybe I'm too picky. Or maybe, the king said with a grin, the storm just hasn't brought her to us yet. They all laughed. But outside, the skies were darkening. And far off on the horizon, thunder began to roll. The rain fell in sheets. Lightning flashed across the castle grounds. Wind howled through the towers. Servants rushed to shutter windows and stoke the fires. In the royal sitting room, the prince stared into the flames. No one's traveling tonight, he murmured. But just then, knock, knock, knock. A loud rapping echoed through the great hall. Everyone turned. At this hour, said the queen. A footman hurried to the door and opened it. There, soaked to the bone and cloaked in shadows, stood a young woman. Her hair clung to her face. Her dress was torn at the hem, and water dripped steadily from her sleeves. But her posture was upright, her chin lifted, not in pride, but in quiet resolve. Good evening, she said, her voice clear despite the storm. I'm sorry to arrive so late, but I've been separated from my caravan. May I seek shelter for the night? The prince stepped forward. Of course, please, come in. The queen narrowed her eyes. And who, may I ask, are you? The girl hesitated, then said calmly, I am a princess. A pause, a crack of thunder. Then the queen smiled politely, but skeptically. I see. The girl didn't argue. She only added, I understand if you don't believe me, but I have nothing to prove it except myself. The prince looked at her closely, not just at her drenched clothes, or the streak of mud on her cheek, but at her eyes. They were tired, but not defeated. We'll prepare a room for you, he said gently. Thank you, she whispered. As the servants led her away, the queen turned to the king and the prince. She claims to be a princess, she said, folding her arms. Let's see if she truly is. Mother, the prince said, a touch of warning in his tone. Oh, don't worry, the queen replied. No tricks, just a little test. She gave a sly smile. One only a real princess could pass. As the rain drummed against the castle walls, the queen summoned her handmaidens to the guest room. Strip the bed, she commanded softly. Remove the mattress. The servants exchanged puzzled glances. Your Majesty, I need 12 mattresses stacked on that frame. And beneath the very bottom one, she produced a small pale green object from her pocket. A single pea. Place this. The maids obeyed. They brought thick downy mattresses from the linen rooms. One after another, they stacked them high, until the bed looked more like a tower than a place to rest. At the bottom, nearly invisible, the queen herself placed the pea, adjusting it just so. If she truly is a princess, the queen whispered, she'll feel it. Mother, said the prince gently, stepping in behind her, this seems cruel. A real princess has skin so delicate, so refined, she would sense a single grain beneath 100 layers of silk. The queen replied, if she sleeps soundly, we'll know she's not what she claims to be. The prince said nothing, but as he looked up at the towering bed, doubt gnawed at him. She was exhausted, cold, alone. Should that not be enough reason to offer her kindness? But the queen had already turned away. Later that night, the girl returned to the room, freshly bathed and dressed in a borrowed nightgown. She stared at the bed in astonishment. "That's the bed," she murmured. "It looks like a hill." She smiled a little, uncertain whether it was a joke or a challenge. Climbing carefully, she reached the top and slid beneath the covers. The sheets were warm. The candlelight flickered softly. Outside, the storm had gentled into a breeze, and yet she shifted. Then again, a dull ache pressed at her back. A strange bump, not sharp, just wrong. She turned over, fluffed the pillow, lay still, but the pressure remained. "What is that?" she whispered into the dark. She closed her eyes, tried to rest, but the discomfort wouldn't leave. All night, she tossed and turned, each breath caught between sleep and wakefulness. And in the royal chambers, the queen slept like a cat beside a saucer of cream. Morning light streamed through the tall windows of the castle. Birds chirped, the storm long gone. In the great hall, the queen sipped her tea and waited, her fingers tapping lightly on the rim of her cup. The prince stood beside her, arms crossed. "This test of yours," he said quietly. "It wasn't very kind." The queen raised an eyebrow. "We must be certain, darling. The crown is no place for pretenders." Before he could reply, the doors opened. The guest, the girl from the storm, entered. She looked composed but tired. Her eyes had shadows beneath them, and she moved stiffly, one hand pressed gently to her back. "Good morning," she said, with as much grace as she could muster. "Good morning, dear," the queen replied, a little too sweetly. "How did you sleep?" The girl hesitated. I'm grateful for the shelter," she said honestly. "But to be perfectly truthful, I barely slept at all." The queen's fingers paused mid-stir. "Oh, there was something in the bed," the girl continued. "I don't know what. A lump, a pressure. I tried everything, but it felt like a rock buried deep beneath the blankets." The prince turned to her, eyes widening. "You felt it?" he asked. She gave a sheepish smile. "It sounds silly, I know, but yes. My back is bruised, I think." The queen's cup clinked as she set it down slowly. Then she rose from her seat, walked to the girl, and curtsied. "Forgive me," the queen said. "We doubted you. But only a true princess could feel a single pea beneath 12 mattresses." The girl blinked. "A pea. It was a test," the queen said. "And you passed it." The girl was quiet for a moment. Then she laughed. Not in anger, but with soft surprise. "Well," she said, "I suppose I'll always trust my instincts when something feels off beneath me." The prince smiled, not at the test, or the cleverness of it, but at the honesty in her voice, the calm in her eyes. "You came through a storm, asked for nothing, and never once boasted," he said. "You didn't need to prove yourself." He stepped forward. "I was searching for a real princess, but what I needed was someone real." He knelt. "Would you stay? Not because of your title, but because of who you are." She looked down at him, a prince who had chosen kindness over pride, and nodded. "I will." And so, the prince and the princess were wed. The queen insisted the pea be placed in a velvet box and displayed in the castle as a symbol of discernment. The princess, amused, let her, but she never wore jewels to outshine others. She never gave orders that weren't rooted in kindness. She ruled with grace, dignity, and a backbone so strong even 12 mattresses could not disguise discomfort. For that, the people adored her. And the prince, he never stopped being amazed by her. "All that from a pea," he once whispered as they walked hand in hand through the palace garden. She laughed and replied, "Sometimes, the smallest things reveal the deepest truths."